Disclaimer before we begin, there will be minor spoilers, and quotes and sources were originally in Portuguese, so translations will only be partially accurate. There are a few noteworthy games I can think of that have come from South America. For me, most of them come from Chilean developer Ace Team, creator of the Rock of Ages games and Abyss Odyssey, which I've spoken about in my 2017 list. Today, though, I'm going to be talking about Toren, a game from 2015 from Brazilian developer Swordtales, and is said to have been inspired by games like Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, as well as the dungeon concept of Zelda, and animation from Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli. But I can't jump into talking about the game just yet because this game wouldn't exist without funding from the Brazilian Ministry of Culture, where their symbol comes up when you launch the game. I took the opportunity to begin educating myself about how difficult it can be to get projects like Toren off the ground, and Brazil is a country that, in 2013, did not consider games as a form of culture, said by the former Minister of Culture, Marta Suplicy. Swordtales began work on Toren in 2011, in-house, and then received funding through the Ruinet Law in 2013, and according to Alessandro Martinello, the director for Toren in an interview, very little of what had been done at the beginning continued in the project after the injection of 370,000 reals that the approval provided. Quote, "Without the financing, it would not be possible to stay with the quality that remained, not only in the graphical sense, but to really get good, you need time, and time, in this case, is money. But in that time, we ended up learning the trade." Making something like Toren seemed to be a tremendous learning experience for them, especially when making connections in the industry, as well as sponsors in order to fund your project. In 2012, Toren even received positive feedback and acclaim from people such as Jonathan Blow, known for Braid, but the Swordtales team found themselves unable to continue production, and eventually used the Ruinet Law to continue development. The Ruinet Law provides funds for use in art and culture, and encourage cultural investments approved by the Ministry of Culture. Even then, there is opposition to this law because rather than directly investing in culture, critics have argued that the ministry began to let companies themselves decide which kind of culture deserves to be sponsored. From an interview with IGN Brazil, Swordtales wanted Toren to be something special and pronounced, especially with the funding it was receiving. Quote, "There are very few things that can be taken seriously in Brazil today. Although there is an extraordinary advance in recent years, Toren is taking a higher risk because you have to trust that people will consume a good product. These games can change and inspire people to enter the market more forcefully." So what does Toren present to the player? If I were to describe Toren in a few words, it would be atmospheric, level-headed adventure. The comparison to specifically Ico is felt throughout the game, revolving around the tower, or Toren in Dutch, much like Ico's castle environment. The general story of Toren revolves around men rebelling against their fate. Men created the tower, Toren, in order to reach the stars and embrace the moon, surpassing the heavens. The sun, angry at man's actions, refused to leave the sky, banishing moonlight forever. As the Moonchild, you are destined to climb the tower, defeat the dragon, and as a result, free the moon. The story of Toren gripped me in specific ways. When I first played this, I wondered whether or not this story was inspired by Brazilian or South American folklore and creation myths in some way. My answer to this is that the story seems fairly original to its environment, and I have no definitive evidence to claim that the story was inspired by any of the multiple creation myths that exist. The closest place that I can connect Toren's story is to the Xingu tribe, and the collection of the Villas Boas book. The Xingu have a creation myth of man, as well as a myth for the death of mankind and the world. There are connections to the sun and the moon in the creation of the world as well, but in Toren the sun could be seen as life, but can also be seen as death, as Toren's world is stuck in time with the sun constantly in the sky. The world cannot move forward and progress, exemplified by the dragon's ability to petrify its surroundings. Everything is stuck. There are plenty of creation myths from South America attached to various tribes, as well as sun and moon myths, but Toren's story revolves more around the theme of time and its relation to life and death. There are very few characters in Toren. First you have the Moonchild, your character, who starts off perishing against the dragon, only to reincarnate within the tower to live again in order to defeat the dragon. Her role plays into the other characters in the game, such as the mage, who serves as the closest thing to a mentor the Moonchild receives. The mage is also the person who rallied men together to build Toren and is responsible for what the Moonchild must do, but now, through self-reflection of his own, understands what needs to be done and hopes to achieve even the smallest shred of mercy. Through the mage, we also learn about the history of the tower, the Moonchild's purpose, the knight's path the Moonchild is following, and also a character named Solidor. You learn of Solidor as you progress through the story and by completing small challenges within dreams. Solidor is a knight of pure heart, who grew in opposition against the building of the tower, and saw dreams of a weeping girl. He eventually climbed the tower in order to defeat the dragon himself, but was slain, his sword left behind. Solidor, however, is someone who has confronted his own abyss, or darkness, and has achieved enlightenment and eternity when other men have failed. Through reason, emotion, beauty, and justice, he was able to travel through his own abyss, embrace it, and the sun and the moon together to truly defeat time itself. The Moonchild, once broken free from humanity, and Solidor, together, will defeat the dragon. The dragon is pretty much a metaphor. My interpretation is the dragon stands for staying in the past, scared of what the future holds or what it could mean. Taking comfort in what you already understand, know, and do is simple. Having a dominating figure like a dragon standing in front of you, blocking your way, and making you petrified and trying to reach for new heights is appropriate. And how this is used in gameplay is really cool. The Moonchild's reincarnation can play into your next go at a challenge, seeing a new stone statue where it was not before. The Moonchild is also very vulnerable until you get the sword, and even then, the dragon has the ability in certain segments to throw the sword away, as you are really only guaranteed safety when carrying it. Gameplay is also where the Ico inspiration comes back in, because everything is serviceable. You don't do a lot of combat with the sword, but also the Moonchild is not an experienced sword fighter, so swinging the sword is awkward, but it's supposed to be. Apart from the dragon, there are also small shadow creatures that are around, but they mean so little in the grand scheme of the game that they might as well not be there. But I feel that the weight of the sword is communicated well, especially when stabbing into the ground as a hold against gusty winds. Platforming is fine, with the occasional jump that feels weird, or is stronger than it should be. I'm trying to think about how the developers wanted their game to be, versus what I wanted in the game. For instance, there is not a lot of challenge in Toren. The puzzles, if you can even call them puzzles, are very basic. The only puzzle I got stuck on was in the first dream, Reason, where at the end you just need to press the switches of the symbols you have made beforehand. Other than climbing the tower and opening your way to the next bit, or following the roundabout path for continuing your climb, a lot of time is dedicated to filling the sacred figures with salt. I'm sure there is significance to this practice, but as I was doing this in-game, I felt that I was being really disrespectful as my lines were all squiggly or just plain missing. It actually gets to the worst part of the game for me, in the Abyss specifically, where you have to fill the lines with salt, but in pitch blackness. This is not really a challenge, but waiting around for a flash to make sure you are not straying from the lines you're tracing is annoying to say the least. But I don't think that the developers wanted their game to be challenging. It is more tailored to be a tight-knit experience, so they went more into the game's presentation ability. Depending on what reviews you read, and some of them sound downright cruel, the graphics are make or break to whether or not you will enjoy this game. The Moonchild's brief opportunities for characterization show the Hayao Miyazaki inspiration, and the game has a consistent style overall. Visuals are able to be pushed when traveling through the dream sequences, with some really cool concepts they played around with, but also shortcomings, like reason and emotion having similar design, but emotion also having the only water-based level in the game, allowing for a unique color palette you really don't see anywhere else in the game. Another problem I see from reviews is that the game is too short. You can get through this game in about 2 hours, shorter if you skip some of the dreams, since some of them are optional. I think it is fine for the presentation they were going for. Nothing outstays its welcome except for the Abyss's waiting times, and if it was longer, I feel that there would have been parts of the game that repeated more than once, like fighting the dragon on different tiers of the tower. Nothing would have been added by putting in additional encounters. Getting through the windy sections and the winter section near the end by lighting the torches almost felt too long in and of themselves, but the atmosphere of both scenarios helped me through it. The game is able to show the exertion of the Moonchild as she grows and as she climbs, and there is something about how her back is turned during the winter section that just gets to me. I like it. It just makes me get into a headspace that I like. Going back to the IGN Brazil interview, Martinello said, quote, "We want to be an example of quality and overcoming." I certainly believe that Toren and Swordtales is an example of overcoming a lot of boundaries in order to make any project a reality. Talking about expectations for the game, Martinello also stated, quote, "But it depends a lot on what people are going to say and their prejudices. So I'll say this. Toren is much like what the game advertises itself as. On the Steam page, it reads, 'A journey of learning and fulfillment. As the story progresses, your character will age from a mere infant to grown woman, creating new mechanics and challenges for each learning experience and phase of her life. Toren emerges young, unsure on its feet, and stumbles as it tries to get its footing. In conclusion, Toren shows a lot of the baby steps in becoming a professionally made game, and it is a game that I wholeheartedly respect.' Thanks for watching.